Hello there. I have a spooky farmhouse Halloween skull and pumpkin set that I can't wait to share with you. I'm Whitney with Crafty Thoughts and Whatnots, and let's jump into the craft room. So, today's video is quite long, but look at this. I got into my Halloween stash, and I have two of these left. I got them at Michael's some years ago. So let me see. This it's Ashland's. I'm going to show you the sticker like it matters. Here's the sticker, Ashland's Halloween. Now see, at least Michael's doesn't make you feel bad by putting the date on there by how many years ago you bought it. Like Hobby Lobby's like, Hobby Lobby Fall Decor 2016. Yes, you've had it that long. No, Michael's is just like, yeah, you bought it from us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this skull and we're going to distress it a little bit. So I'm using some mineral, I almost said flavored. Mineral flavored? No, don't taste your chalk paint, people. And I haven't myself. You might be a little hungry. Regardless. Mineral, I almost said flavor again. Mineral color chalk paint by Waverly. And I'm also going to use the Waverly Antique Wax. I'm just taking a chip brush. And I'm just randomly dry brushing all over it. I'm making it look like stone, like aged, like bone. We just want it to not look styrofoam. Basically, that's all I'm doing. So I'm taking a couple different brushes. Now, see this little brush here? I got a brush set off of Amazon, and I really like it with the different chalk paints and this wax here. I'm really liking these brushes. So if you're interested in it, I would suggest it. I like the brushes so far. I've had them for about a week. They're listed in my Amazon shop, which is in my link and in my comment below. You can take a peek at them. And now what we're going to do is after I've put all those paints, and not the paints, but the paint and the wax on the skull, I'm going to use the same wax and paint on this creepy cloth here that I got at Dollar Tree. So I think Dollar Tree has two colors. I think, yeah, I do. I have a black and a white creepy cloth. So what I'm doing is I'm going to distress it because it doesn't look aged and dirty and, you know, it doesn't look Halloween enough. It's not spooky enough for me yet. So I'm just taking the same paints that I had left over on my brush and I'm just dabbing it on there. I'm kind of like just taking a little bit here and there and just dabbing over the top. And then it also still wasn't getting dark enough for me because the mineral wasn't showing up as much as I'd like. So I added just a little bit of black acrylic paint here and there just to give it a little bit more of an aged look. And this is actually too much creepy cloth. So you'll see that's how the pumpkin gate came to life because I had a little bit too much extra. So on here, I kind of want to drape this over. This is going to be a girl. This is going to be a lady skeleton. And I wanted to kind of drape it over like, you know, those fancy little hats people wear, not necessarily to funerals, but in any event. I wanted it to be like a little bit of a netting so it kind of goes across the top of her face. So I'm going to use a couple floral pins here. This is like U-shaped piece of metal. You can get them in the floral department anywhere. And I'm going to use that mainly to hold this in. The best part about this skull is it's one big chunk of styrofoam. So we can use this as our styrofoam block. Now, moving on. I'm also going to put a net over her face. Now a little bit, I got these off of Amazon. They're just a couple pieces of netting. I'm not sure if you can even get this anymore, but I also have a hack I'm going to show you in a minute. I made some skeletons I made a set of skeletons, Stan and Stella skeleton. I'll show you in a second. At some point, I put it in here. Now I bought the netting from like a bag of rocks and I put that over her face, but I didn't have any more. So I just ordered it. Here's Stan and Stella. So here's Stan. And this guy here has made, this hat right here is a child's hat I got at Walmart. And then I added the ribbon and the feather and the florals and stuff. And the sad part is I'm using the same bundle of fall leaves on this new girl here. Here's Stella. Now see, there's no paint. I made this so long ago when I first started doing stuff, you know, for Halloween. But this right here is from a bag of rocks, a decorative rocks. It's either the glass beads or rocks that you get in the you know, in the styrofoam aisle, like at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you can get the glass beads to put in candle holders. That's what that's from. So you don't necessarily have to buy netting. You could even use tulle. Tulle would be a little bit, you know, more opaque. It wouldn't be as big. This particular netting I got on Amazon, I think I paid a couple bucks for it, but I did have to wait forever for it to show up, if you know what I mean. So if you have some netting or some sort of ribbon like this, you could use this in the same way, same fashion. But you see, I'm going to pinch it in the middle and I want to cause it to kind of cascade over the front of her face, kind of like you would see on those, you know, Sunday, not Sunday, I don't really know, like you see like derby hats. If you know what I mean, type it in the comments below because I'm having such a problem with my words and putting them into sentence making at the moment. Sorry, guys. Anywho, if you get the idea, you also have seen by the thumbnails and the pictures, if you follow me on Instagram or if you're part of my coffee page and you take a peek at my stuff, I've put those out there. I'm trying to make it look almost like a like a fancy little hat that you'd put on her. So she's ready for her spooky event. She's just spooky fabulous, you know what I'm saying? It's just how she likes to look. She's cute. And she's just going to be ready to go and just fabulous. It's going to be so fabulous. So I folded this in half. I've cut a certain amount out. I kind of measured a little bit from the top of the skull down to where I want it to kind of fall, basically to where the bottom of the skull is. Now we're going to put the skull on something a little bit tricky in a moment, but I'll show you, not tricky, but you know, like, hey, surprisingly, you know, it's a recycle item. Makes me happy. So here I'm taking it, I folded it in half, and instead of gathering it like you would a piece of deco mesh, if you're familiar with that, I kind of placed it on top of the skull and then gathered it from there so that I could get the proper cascade. Even at some point, it started to kind of pop back up on me. If this has been a mesh that was, you know, like previous on Stella, you would see, you know, a thicker mesh that had more meat and potatoes to it, if you know what I mean. It probably wouldn't have popped out as much. I didn't want to apply too much heat to it because I didn't want to melt it, which is why you saw me using the blow dryer, the hair blow dryer, just to get some of those bends and curves out of it from shipping where it's folded. So I just put a tiny bit of hot glue underneath it where I know I wanted it, and then I used another floral pin to place that in its main spot. And again, we are going to put so much wonderful stuff on top of this. However you secure this, don't worry, because it won't show, should you choose to do the same. So again, and I kept thinking, like, I could probably even put another layer of tulle somewhere in here, but I didn't want to cover up that spooky cloth. I kind of liked it. It kind of looks a little bit like hair, but I'm going more for, again, the decorative, you know, women's hats that look all pretty, but, you know, in a spooky farmhouse fabulous way. That's apparently my new word for this video, is fabulous. So here I'm still trying to mess with it. And you guys, I cut a decent amount out of this too with me messing with this stuff. This was back and forth for a couple days. This video took about a couple days more than a couple days for me to go back and forth. There's also, we're going to be using air dry clay and IOD mold and all that good stuff. I put a poll out on my YouTube channel asking you guys, which mold did you think I was going to do something spooky on a skull, and I wanted to know which mold. And luckily, I wanted to use the primitive mold, and it won, so we used it. So here, actually, you can see it still wasn't laying correctly, and I ended up cutting strips into the top piece because it's folded in half. So I have 2 layers, so I have a little bit of dimension because it's like kind of, I'm getting like Cyndi Lauper, girls just want to have fun vibes, you know, but I love it. I love it in a spooky Halloween way. Tell me if you know what I mean, that Cyndi Lauper 80s. Then again, I'm from the 80s, so maybe that's why I keep associating with that. So I grabbed a bundle of Spanish moss, and I'm just kind of placing it right on top. I don't believe I glued it down. Yeah, I glued it just a little bit. Again, I've recorded this and edited this over the course of a few days, so please forgive me if it sounds like I'm just kind of narrating myself as I go, because a lot of times that's usually what I'm doing. But I have some eucalyptus that I got here at Dollar Tree, and it's the perfect color. Now, I got this last year, but please, have you ever been in somewhere and you're like looking at your own stash and you're like, I was meant to buy this last year and never use it, because this was perfect for this project. It was the perfect color. It's a very muted fall eucalyptus bush, but it's the perfect, like, I want it to be dreary and dead looking and very, you know, aged and like it's been in a crypt for years. It's just, yeah, it's petrified or preserved. I love the way, it's the perfect color. I couldn't have been happier. So now that we've got the base of the skull together, now we're going to use the primitive mold from Iron Orchid Designs. I get all of my Iron Orchid Design supplies from Lori at miltonsdaughter.com. So if you would need to, I also got some air dry clay. Now I had some already open, so I'm not opening that package, and I'm going to work it because now this air dry clay is at least 2 years old. But I'm telling you guys, with re-wetting it, I put baby wipes in the bag with it. And then working it here, I just spray a little bit of water and I'm just working it kind of like you would bread and molding it back to it. It hasn't dried out on me, hasn't hardened up on me. So it's a decent brand clay, guys. The new stuff in that package is super soft. Now this is going to make me work for it a little bit, but that's my own fault. But anyways, again, I get all my IOD products from Lori at miltonsdaughter.com. You can check my description for the link and a coupon code for incentives off of your future purchases. There's a first-time purchase for specific items in her cart. She has a lot of wonderful products on her website. She is a wonderful human being. Take a look at her because she'll treat you well. So now what we need for the air dry clay is I'm kind of putting, you have to put corn. You don't have to, but it's advised that you should. It makes it release more if I would actually speak in. See again, guys, the whole sentence making thing. That's cornstarch. You put cornstarch in the mold. It helps the clay release from it better. Now, these molds are very good. Now, I have some molds I've gotten from other places, from Amazon and some other ones. I put hot glue in them, things like that. These molds, by far, are an investment. Now, if you get for proper sales in different times of the year, you can actually be pretty frugal and get them at a good price. But they are an investment, but they are so worth it. The quality. They have all these little ridges around there, so you can actually run your finger across the ridges. You see the ridges around the outside? And then when you pop out your mold, see, I didn't put quite enough cornstarch in, for my opinion. Also, it might be because some of my clay is a little bit drier than it needs to be. But the details that you get out of these iron orchid molds, I mean, every time I use one of these molds with air dry clay, I did a video with the mushroom mold, and again, the names of the molds are coming off, are escaping me at the moment, but I've used a sunflower, I've done some mushrooms and some other things, and they're just good quality. The details are great. And this primitive mold, I had a different idea in mind, and it would have been, you can even do like a nicer, like a younger type feel, like a sugar skull type thing, or, you know, Dia de los Muertos, some type thing with decorating all around the skull's eye sockets and then the cheekbones and down the jaw. That would be awesome. This primitive mold would do that. You have flowers, you've got leaves. I mean, you could even put some of the birds on there, do kind of like a, what is those t-shirts, like an Ed Hardy kind of look to it, like a punk, not punk rock, but like maybe a 50s rocker or rockabilly type thing. You could do all kinds of options with these things, and it all depends on how you apply these. All these molds come out the same, and then you can change them with the type of paint or the type of sealing or where you're putting them at on what your project is. I'm using a skull at the moment, but these flowers and these different pods and things, it turned out so much better than I thought. And again, I was going for a stone or a bone look in this particular project. But again, I'm kind of intrigued by that sugar skull idea. So we'll see if that pops up. If there's enough, you know, if you guys want to see that enough, I might do it, just because Halloween's not very popular. My Halloween videos don't ever seem to be do very well. So, and also I personally don't decorate for Halloween. Now, don't get me wrong. I love making Halloween things. I love seeing them. I love Halloween in general, as far as the vibe goes. But I am a pumpkin and I'm a fall girl. So that's where my heart lies. But again, it's not too far off. The pumpkin Halloween people are the same as me, the pumpkin fall people. I get along with all y'all. But I took a lot of these and I just made duplicates. So I'm just trying to get my supplies up. And then here's all of them that I made. Now, these are all still wet. This is just me cutting to a clean desk. And, you know, here's all my little pieces. We're going to apply them to our project now. So I want to also have her like a pedestal, so I'm using this. This is an olive oil bottle from my kitchen. I'm done with my olive oil. So I cleaned it off. I got the label off. That was a whole nother talk show, getting that label off. Oh my Lord. But anyways, we'll move on from that. Also cleaning the bottle out and then getting it dry. Ugh, another one. So my idea is to use the bottle as like a candlestick. So what we're going to do is I pushed her down onto it. Now I want to get this ready before I put the clay on there, because I don't want to be pushing down and putting pressure on that and then cutting out styrofoam after I've already applied the air dry clay and it's either dry or wet or what have you. So I'm just getting it ready. So I'm placing the bottle in there, and you can see me using an X-Acto knife and some pliers, and we're pulling out enough styrofoam to make sure that it looks and it fits down on the top of that olive oil bottle the way we want. Now we can apply our air dry clay pieces. I'm going to use Titebond Quick and Thick. It's a multi-surface glue. It works well on pretty much everything, including wood. Now I like to use Titebond wood glue on a lot of wood projects. It is very solid. But Titebond Quick and Thick is also very good for glass, which is why I chose it for this particular one as well, because we're going to be gluing these to not only the styrofoam skull here, but also the glass olive oil bottle that we're recycling. So here I'm going to speed this up a little bit and show you. This is just me playing with placement. I had an idea. Now with what I was thinking and some of the way things were turning out, you're going to see a lot of me just messing around, placing things here and there, seeing if I like them. Once I see something, I've mentioned before, if you've been with me for a little bit or you've watched some of my other videos, you get that happy, crafty, squishy feeling in your heart, and then you know it's in its right place. That's how I know that I'm in the right spot. That's how I know that I'm getting to where I want it to be. And that's when I will commit. You'll either see me just glue in a floral piece, or if I'm grabbing the glue, the hot glue, and in this case, it's the quick and thick, the tight bond glue. If you see me, I'm rubbing that glue and I'm committing to that spot. That's where I'm going to put it. Now, a lot of this in the beginning was just kind of single layer application. And then I started to get a little bit happier here. And you'll see here, I'm kind of layering things on top. I started to put things on top of each other. Best time to do that when your clay is still malleable, when it's still not fully dried. You see here, I'm going to put this flower towards the top on some of that spooky cloth, the netting. And then also here, I'm showing you, it kind of is pushed up against another piece and on top of that longer leaf piece coming down the forehead. When you start to get that, then they're kind of like 3D, and it starts to change the whole look of it. And you have that option while the clay is still malleable, like I said. Now, nothing's stopping you from letting these pieces dry 100% and then putting them on. But remember, we're putting things on curved surfaces. If you're going to put it on something flat, no worries. Then let it dry completely and go about your crafty business. But this instance, we want them to be malleable. Now, so some of these pieces are very small. So the clay was drying as I was making this, because again, this was not a quick process by any means. But here I'm just layering the flowers. I'm going to put a couple pieces down kind of like by where the temple would be, like right above the eye, and it turned out so much better than I thought it could. And I absolutely love her. And I mean, I know I named her Linda earlier, but I really don't want to name her Linda. You guys help me name her. What do you think would be a good name for her? Something very fitting of other than, I mean, I was getting Cyndi Lauper vibes earlier with the netting, but right now I think I'm getting like Goonies piano skeleton, or like Pirates of the Caribbean High Priestess of the Sea. I don't know. You guys let me know. I'm getting different vibes from it, but you guys let me know. What should we name her? As many votes as you can get. Everybody talk about it in the comments below. I'll keep watch and we'll see what we're going to name her, because I really need to name her, and Linda won't be it. Otherwise, I'm going to name her Sheila or something, and that'll be after my mom. You guys tell me. So now we're moving on to the bottle, and I'm going to curve some of these pieces around the bottle, because remember, we still have very wet clay. So I'm taking the same process here, and I'm just kind of rubbing putting in a decent coat of the quick and thick on the back of each piece, and I'm pushing it along. Now I had to be careful not to set the bottle on the end that I had just already decorated, because then I'm going to actually smush my clay pieces. So here I'm just kind of holding it left and right, just kind of trying to get things here and there, trying to place them in their new homes. But at some point I was like, wait, Whitney, you're going to crush your item. And so I was like, stand it up, be careful, and then start to see if your pieces are a bit heavy, like those larger leaf pieces, we're kind of sliding down a little bit. If you use too much glue, they're going to slide a lot. Then at that point, you can usually just take it in pieces or sides and use masking tape or painter's tape to hold them in place. I am not that patient to wait a day or two or a few hours and then come back and work at it again, then come back, work at it again. I placed them all on there. I didn't have anything fall off. I didn't have anything slide. A few were sliding while I was working on it, but that's because I was moving the bottle. The bottle was constantly being moved. So that's my experience. But you can tape certain things. I've seen other YouTubers like Crafty Kathy. I've seen her do a lot with molds, and she's taped the molds in place. But it depends on your medium and what you're actually placing these things on. So now that we've got everything placed, now we're coming back. This is the next day here. I've let everything dry. So all of these pieces are now dry on the bottle and the skull. So I'm going to use the same two paints that we've been going on, the same theme. Here I've crossed over, so I'm using my Waverly Antique Wax, and now this is also the Waverly Chalk Paint in the color Mineral, and I'm just distressing it. And I'm not going to paint this whole bottle. I'm just distressing the part here with the molds on it so that it looks like aged stone. And I want it to match the top of the skull, so I want it to look like these items have been weathered through the storm. And again, our skull is going to cover the top part of that bottle, so only just a little bit of that green is showing. It's also the perfect color green. It's a very muted, dark olive green. It's beautiful with these colors. Same application for the skull. I'm covering most of these things. I don't want any of the white to show. I want it to look aged. I want it to look like it's stone or part of the bone decoration. And I am going to take, it's a chip brush, and I'm really kind of just stippling or pouncing the brush up and down because I want the bristles to get into the grooves. I want to cover up all this. Now as we come back in with the mineral paint, you'll see that it picks up all of the details on the edges. You can see everything pops out. So This is like the happy part where I just kept looking at it. Now I started to get a little bit of paint mud, so I had to dry it there with my little mini, that's a travel hair dryer that I love using to dry paints because it gets warm but not hot, it doesn't melt. And so you can see that mineral paint picked up a lot of the details, and I was like starting to get happy, starting to get so happy and excited. So it wasn't getting gloomy enough for me though, so I did the same thing that we did with the spooky cloth, and I'm just taking very small bits of black, and I'll show you here. Do you see right there at the temple, or her, like right where the eyebrow is? Very small bits of black just to highlight in certain areas. I didn't want to put big splotches. Do you see here, like in the middle of that bigger flower, little tiny spots? That was my idea. That was my inspiration, my application, you could say. And I think it turned out great. Now for the rest of the skull, I ended up going kind of do it like a dry brush type deal so that I could get it to kind of look all the same around the edges. And see here, then I noticed that a lot of what I was doing, I didn't cover up enough of the white of the dried clay. So I went back in with a smaller detail brush, and I'm just adding all of this to the edges to darken it, to color it, to paint it. So I'm kind of going over this again, but that was because these other pieces that were popping through was just too much for me. I was like, I can see too much white. It looks like it was half, we'll say for lack of a better term, half butted. Right, let me know in the comment below if you understand what I'm saying, because I use this a lot, but I'm pretty sure YouTube's not going to allow me to say it. It was half butted, you know what I'm saying? It looked like I didn't really put much effort into it. So I'm coming back and I'm just reapplying the antique wax into the crevices so that I'm covering up those white pieces, and then also reapplying the mineral chalk paint to cover up a lot of the to apply it over the brown wax in order for it to not look like it was just splotches of brown wax. So I had to redo that. I had to do the same thing with the skull also, but I'm not going to make you painfully watch me do the same thing. So the bigger chunks in the skull, if you could see white, I covered it with the antique wax, and then I put more Waverly mineral paint over that. So now we've got all these florals. I've got a combination of Hobby Lobby and Michael's florals here. And what I did was I literally pulled them apart. So this is like a fern type deal I got at Michael's so many years ago that I know it doesn't matter because I really don't know if you'll ever be able to find them. But again, pick comparable colors. That's usually how I go about things. Even if you think they don't look right together, remember, you're not going to keep, majority of the time for me, I'm not ever going to keep any of these bundles in their original form. I rip things apart. I cut them apart constantly. They never stay as they were intended or as they were made. Technically, no one knows what they're intended for, but as they were made. So I cut the ferns apart. I used about 2 to 3, and I cut one of them in half. And then don't forget to decorate the back of the skull, since this piece is technically kind of like a centerpiece. The back may be seen here and there. Now, these are more on the grayer side, but again, I like the color palette, and I didn't want them to be too long, so I kind of just glued the little styrofoamy flowery part right here just into the Spanish moss. So I have enough of, I have enough product and enough items in there that we can start gluing them to each other, and they will support each other. You don't always necessarily need to put everything into the chunk of styrofoam. You can use it and glue things to other things if you want to get a different length, if you want to get a different look, fullness, or you want to fill a hole. You don't have to throw everything into a chunk of styrofoam. Now remember, our skull is our styrofoam block because she's made of styrofoam. So I'm adding a lot of these little things here. I'm trying to make them look a little bit even. But at the same time, remember, I keep getting I want to say High Priestess of the Sea from Calypso, from Pirates of the Caribbean, or however you say it. You know what I'm saying? And then there's one of those fall leaves that came from this, I've had that bundle since I made Stan and Stella. And I can tell you guys, I made Stan and Stella probably more than 6 years ago. So I've had this bundle for a while, but it's like the perfect, that little bundle there to the left it's a Hobby Lobby bundle. It had sticks in it, and it had the leaves, and it had some little pods. It was really pretty. And now this little guy here, these little green ones, I'm using them for filler. I hadn't planned on putting them in there, but I'm using them for filler. I'm kind of stuffing them up underneath some places where you have some holes, and it might look like a little bit of, behind the scenes is popping through, but they're definitely not a focal point. So I was just popping those in. So then I added some more of those longer styrofoam ball type flower dealios, and then I was like, okay, when are you gonna stop? It's starting to look like a crown, like it's a crown. That's why I keep saying I'm getting High Priestess vibes. But I love it. I love how it turned out. So now I'm putting Tite Bond Quick and Thick on the glass, and I put hot glue inside the base of the I almost said pumpkin. See, pumpkin's always on my mind. Inside the base of the skull, and once that dries, she's solid. It's been a few days, more than that, right now that I'm recording this voice recording, and it's solid. Everything is solid. So Titebond Quick and Thick is a very nice glue if you've got the patience for it. Now, normally I am not a patient person when it comes to gluing, but again, it's not something like, that you need to hold on to. Once you glue it down, you just let it cure for a couple days and you're good to go. And half the time when I make a project, it sits, after I take pictures of it, it sits in its spot for a couple days anyways before I move it or do something or gift it or find somewhere or try to sell it, you name it. But here she is. Look how pretty she is. So here's a left and right side profile so you can get both the netting fancy hat and then also our beautiful little floral side to her. Tell me what you think, and that's about it. I hope you like it as much as I do. So I had some leftover supplies, so I decided to make a pumpkin to match her because, pumpkins are life. Life is pumpkins. Pumpkins are life. So this is a black carvable pumpkin that I got at Dollar Tree last year. I have not seen them this year, but I have only been to Dollar Tree once. Again, we're talking about, this is end of August right now, and I had a medical procedure that's kept me kind of home a little bit. So I haven't been out in the stores just yet. I'm dying to get to Hobby Lobby. So I'm not sure if they're out this year, but it's a styrofoam pumpkin. If you don't, get a pumpkin, paint it black, and then distress it with the mineral chalk paint. And this is because I want it to match our fancy little skull girl. So I'm going to take, this is some jute twine, particularly this from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to wrap around all of the ridges of the pumpkin. So I'm going to get in all of these little ridges so it kind of accentuates the pumpkin shape that I love so much. And then I wrapped it twice. So every single one has about 2 wrappings, maybe 3, I can't tell, maybe 2 or 3 from each side. I kind of just made it look all a little, kind of crazy, little helter-skelter all over the place. You know what I'm saying? So then here's my leftover spooky cloth. And even on this pumpkin, I still had too much spooky cloth. That stuff stretches out. It's like the cobwebs that you can get in a bag. You think you're like, this is such a tiny amount, and then it turns into like 50 million yards, and you can never get it out of the stucco on your house. Not that I've ever done that. I've done it at work, and you find it later in the wheels of your chair at work. You're like, yeah, they let me decorate for Halloween, and they never let you decorate it again, and you know why? That's why. But anyways, I digress. I took that across the street, didn't I? This spooky cloth went a long way. So I kind of draped it over the top. I used a couple places. I used some hot glue, and I just kind of got it to just drape down the sides so it looks, its namesake, spooky. Here's my little bucket of stems. So I've got sticks from a pyracantha bush in my front yard. These are all my leftovers from the gourds that I'd spoken before in my previous video. I save these stems at the end of the year. Every time those gourds go bad, I pull the stems out, and then the gourd goes in the trash, and I keep those stems. They are solid wood, man. Let me tell you, they're solid wood. But look how perfect this one is for this project, you guys. It's like, remember, I'm the person at the grocery store that's digging. I'm like bent over with my legs sticking up out of the pumpkin boxes in the grocery store. Or I'm elbow to shoulder deep in the little gourds looking for the stems that aren't broken. And then I will protect them in the front part of my cart. And then I will also protect them at the register when the person who is bagging groceries tries to take them and throw them all in one box and break them. That won't happen. They stay with me and they sit up front in the car with me until they are home. And as I talk through all of this, I added some Spanish moss. I'm adding some more leftovers of that same eucalyptus from Dollar Tree. That is a hydrangea bush that probably it's either Dollar Tree or Michael's. Probably Michael's. And then here is some pitberry garland. I got this particular one from craftoutlet.com, but you can get pitberry garlands at I was about to say Lowe's or Home Depot. Hobby Lobby and Michael's, and I know Dollar Tree sells it seasonally. I've got some green and white ones from Dollar Tree, but this particular one, I'm making tendrils out of this. So I'm taking it and it's wired. I'm wrapping it around one of my smaller glue sticks so I can get really small coils out of it. So we have some crazy looking tendrils. And I think I added about 3 because I said, why not go over the top? Because that's what we do here. So this is kind of like a spooky fall vibe. And then what I noticed was she was still very, very light because this pumpkin is hollow and it's a Dollar Tree styrofoam pumpkin. So it has no weight to it. So it was starting to get a little bit tipsy on the top with that stem and all the goodies I was adding to it. So this right here is a wreath charm from Dollar Tree. You can get it in their floral aisle, kind of like where you would get the rocks and the Spanish moss and stuff like that. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to use it as a base. So I'm painting it with the mineral chalk paint. And for some reason, you don't see me do it here, but after the mineral chalk paint is dry, I use, here it's dry, but I don't know where my footage went. I distressed it with a little bit with some antique wax around the edges. So it's just a dry brush of antique wax. And you'll see that when we go through the end photos, when I'm doing the studio light photos. But I glue this down. Apparently I distress it after I've glued it down, but I don't remember doing this, you guys. I remember distressing it, but I didn't show it. I glued it down, so now it has a solid base and it's not going to fall over, and she looks so cute. And it's, again, it's not very noticeable in my opinion, but even then it looks like a small little pedestal, so it's cute because, in my opinion, pumpkins should be on pedestals. We'll call them pumpkin pedestals. It's great. It's a thing. Pumpkin pedestals. It's a thing. Put that on a shirt. No, don't. That's kind of, yeah. Anyways, moving on. Moving on before I say something else weird. I made just a weird little twine bow out of some extra twine I had off to the side. It's probably a jute twine from somewhere else, and then I used the twine from Dollar Tree to wrap around the middle. I wrapped it around 4 of my fingers about 4 or 5 times, and then I pinched it in the middle, and then I used another piece of jute to tie it and cinch it in the middle. So you have a very simple bow. And then here we're just going to glue her right to the top. So I'm going to just kind of nestle it in. It's not really a focal point. It's just there as an added little accoutrement. That's one of my favorite words for decorating. And we're just going to put a little dollop of glue on the back of it and put that in there. So it's one of those things where should your eyes, brush across it, it's just one of those things where you say, oh, look at that cute little jute bow. If you're into that sort of thing. It just makes me so happy. I love how all this turned out. And the fact that these two match, so obviously now they're a set. So my new little pumpkin girl, my pumpkin lady, and her pumpkin skull lady, my new skull lady with her fancy hat and my fancy little matching pumpkin, my little spooky time. This is probably about as spooky as you're going to see my house get. I don't decorate like that, but this right here, I'd have absolutely no problem leaving it out. Now, yes, you can still see the styrofoam. We know it's made out of styrofoam. Again, we also know it's not a real pumpkin. So within reason, yeah, these things aren't realistic, but try as much as we can to get them to look realistic. I love every bit. And you can see there the little wreath charm at the bottom we're using as a pedestal. You can see the dry brushing with the antique wax just to, again, tie them all together. So same colors, same color palette, same feel for both the pumpkin and the skull. Tell me what you think. I love how it turned out. I get these, I'm getting little goosebumps, little chills all over when I see them. They make me so happy. These are the things where if you can set them on your desk or you set them in your home somewhere, and every time you pass by them, they make you smile, then they've done their job. If it makes you that happy, or if you're proud of it and you want to give it as a gift or sell this and someone buys it and they love it and it impacts them as much, those are the parts that make you happy. That's why I do it. This is why I make these things. It is so much fun and it's so rewarding to me. And again, an idea that works out, it makes you even happier. I had no idea the end result would look this way, and I absolutely love how it turned out. You guys tell me what you think. And that's it for the video today, guys. It's just the two things. But thank you so much for joining me. You guys are my fuel, and I couldn't thank you enough for showing up every week. And if you're new here, welcome. And I can't wait for you to become part of my crafty friends. And this community is great. So I have a coffee page. Should you feel inspired, or if you learn something from me and you want to support the channel, every little bit helps. It's never required, but always appreciated. And with that being said, I love you all more than I can possibly say in words. Many hugs, happy crafting, and I'll see you in the next video. And I got some good pumpkin stuff coming. Trust me, I promise. All right, that's it. Bye-bye for now.